Hello, everybody. I'm back again, and I'm frozen again. I'm just cold. It's just me. I really need to think about getting myself a heater or something. Needless to say, that's why you're going to see me in sweaters, and you may see me in the same sweater, and you may see me in like warm house coats because I am just so cold. But I have 1 cup of tea, which is going to have to last me for 2 chapters tonight. So for those of you just tuning in, my name is Beth Wagner, and I am reading my dad's manuscripts. And a lot of times I'm doing editing and making comments about it because I'm getting it ready for publishing. And tomorrow night, actually, I will be going over like an overview of all the chapters because I've come to some conclusions. And I'm gonna write down all the conclusions and then go over them after I'm done the next chapter as well. And that's gonna be what I'm gonna be working on the weekend so that I have everything ready to go for when and also probably what I'll be working on during the next week or so because what I have to do is restructure some things. And there was things I noticed before, and so I'm going over old notes, which totally makes sense and they're making more sense as I read through. And I agree with them. And if I agree with them now, even after all this time, then they make a lot more sense for me to make those changes because it's just a universal thing. So, having said that, oh, I'll try not to be so opinionated tonight. We'll try. I'll try to try. um, but I make no promises because I have a tendency to be, if I come across something that's going to really irk me, then I might just continue on talking about it. Um, Other than that, the name of the story that I'm reading right now is called "The Sword and the Rose," and they where we left off right now is I won't go back to the beginning. I'll just talk about what we did last time, and then if you want, you can just go to the beginning of these past the highlights and watch them. I have the highlights are posted in full, so you can actually just watch straight through. And I typically leave them up for a while so that there's enough time for you to be able to view them. Unfortunately, because we have like a limit on Twitch, Twitch has a limit. Therefore, I can only keep 100 hours worth of stuff, and not even that. I have to have lower than that so I can upload stuff. So sorry, Twitch guys. If you want to see full broadcasts of everything, they do live on my YouTube live sections, and I have the one I'm currently working on, and that'll stay up for like a few months until I work on the next one. Once I'm done the story, I will be taking a break while I work through the story. Although I might, who knows? Maybe I'll do some streaming of me coming up with the story idea, like with the rewrites and whatnot. Maybe maybe that'll work. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get started on reading. But yeah, like I was saying, they were about to launch an attack to drive out this baron who has taken over a nearby village that actually is still within the barony of Grandal. So, him. Late that evening, Pemberlint asked permission to enter Gwalsor's tent. The magician was still well dressed, considering conditions on the march. There was a touch of grayness to his face, and his eyes were red brimmed. He bowed politely. My Lord Baron, I believe I have as much information as you require. I'm happy to hear that, Master Pemberlint. How about I call for some refreshment before you tell your tale? I would prefer to have Foraith here, so you need not repeat yourself too often. A cup of wine would be welcome. Sorry, would be welcome, Lord. I'll not deny that. And from the look of you, you had best take a seat before you fall over. The magician smiled. Thank you, my Lord Baron. Work with the melee can be tiring, and to do a proper job of this sort of thing is wearing indeed. Shortly, a servant had brought a cup of wine for the magician, and another brought word that Foraith would be along shortly. While Pemberlin sat sipping his wine, the marshal strode in wearing a brigandine, sword at his side. Melgathop squatted, half seen in a dark corner, an ancient deity of the earth. Master Pemberlin has news for us, Foraith. The marshal looked to the magician, then back to Gwalsor. And what news is that? The Baron smiled. To save him the trouble of telling his story twice, I have waited for you to come before asking. Master Pemberlin? Master Pemberlin drew himself up. It was no easy task. First, I had to go through several mines until I found one close enough to the enemy encampment to be able to tell me enough much about it. Then I had to convince them to move around, changing from one to another from time to time. These kind can only be pressed so far. Well, sir, let the man go on. He seems to feel a need to impress me with his skill. The older ones know I wouldn't. I couldn't do such things. Pemberlin unrolled a parchment. It will be simpler if I show you a drawing of how things are arranged in Wardick's camp. They are building a palisade, thus, though they have not been rushing matters and are still at least a day from finishing, perhaps more. There is a gap here, and as you see, you would have to come around from behind in order to attack that gap. They have stacks of logs here for the palisade, and the buildings to be set up within the palisade. They have barracks here, here, and here, covering the main approaches from this road. He leaned back a bit. On the positive side, if positive it is, they have no more than 25 men there. 6 mounted, 7 archers, and 17 pikemen. Surely the soldiers are not doing the work alone. No, my Lord Baron. I apologize. I ought to have mentioned that they have seized about 30 local peasants and are forcing them to assist in the work. The Baron nodded. I expected as much. Foraith, do you know this country at all? I've been here a time or two, but there are people in our force who know it better than I. Call one of them and have word sent to our commanders, including all the knights. We will have immediate council of war. At this hour, my Lord Baron? They'll be that crossed for it. And they'll be more than crossed if they don't appear. From the look of it, we have one small chance to fight Warwick's people before they get their palisade to the point of being useful. I'll not be happy with any person, common, noble, or wild woods runner, who causes us to lose that chance. Aye, Lord, I'll have it seen to. Gwalsor turned to the magician. Master Magician, I asked your pardon, but there are certainly those in the coming council who will have further questions. I must ask you to attend the council as well, before I allow you to seek your bed. But I will tell you that I know that you have done well. You have my thanks for all your efforts. The sorcerer rose and bowed. My Lord Baron is most gracious. He reseated himself. I am so cold. Sorry, that's not part of the story. The nobles were a fractious bunch, and being Wakened at an unearthly hour of the morning, they were even less tractable. Marquis and Heraldant demanded, "Is it wise, this making of tactical plans on the basis of a wizard's word?" There was a general mutter among them regarding having a commoner in their midst, though there was not a one of them that could claim the knowledge of the tracks and the trails of the local area. Maritor, sorry, Maritordor, Maritordar Cowanlin, one of Dar Darheraldant's knights, said, "It might have been better to have had a council of all nobles and arrive at a plan in concert." A lesser knight, whose name Gualter did not catch, complained that his own part in the attack was too small, that the others were being given the chance to reap all the renown for that might be forthcoming. It was at this point that Gualsor slammed the leather encased stump of his wrist down on the table. "Enough!" He glared around at them. "Renown and glory and renown you wish? Well, look at this, lords." He raised his left arm in front of them. "This has brought me all the glory and renown I desire. And if you think that this morning's small action will be the last battle ever fought in or for Grandel Barony, you are fools. There will be other chances for glory, other chances for fame, and believe me when I say I will keep in mind those who help me and those who thwart me. The plan is made, all is set, and I will entertain no more talk, save from anyone who can show me how part of this plan has a definite fault, or some other method would have a better chance of success." He paused and looked around. No one was willing to speak. "Now then, to your places, and woe betide though the one who fails to do his part to the utmost. My suggestion to such one is that ensure you are killed on the field. If not, you shall wish you had been." He looked around at the gathering. He looked around at the gathering. Okay, hold on. Did I mention this is a rough draft? Did I mention I have to rewrite this? Yes. Okay, give me a second here. Gwelsor watched the archer who led them through the winding trails, led them with the assurance of long years of experience. Gwelsor had had to swear his word to the man that no harm would come to him of it, meaning that the archer would not fear prosecution as a poacher. But Gwelsor was happy to give that promise, in particular if it had the result he had hoped for. Much depended on how the other part of his plan went. He picked for that one of the knights who seemed steadiest, Weltic Dar Haranas, who impressed on him how important his task was. He would have left Forith there in charge, but he had a feeling that leaving the marshal in charge of one small detachment might indicate both a distrust in the marshal and distrust in Gueltec. Forith might not feel it personally, but he might find his orders a little less readily obeyed. And if the Baron continually had to interfere to support his marshal's orders, he may as well not have a marshal at all. Of course, taking the marshal along might indicate a distrust in him as well. He smiled tightly. No decision is completely right, it seems. Well, one thing at a time. The archer held up a hand to signal a halt, and Gwalsor passed the signal on. The man came back to the Baron's side, bobbed his head in a short bow, and said, "Your pardon, my Lord Baron. There be a spot a little way on where a man might be expecting a guard. If Warwick's men be wary, bide ye here a bit, whilst I skulk headward to sea. Ghalsor nodded. Go ahead. Foraith watched the archer slipped off into the night. For certain, the man had good cause to fear prosecution for a poacher. Not that Foraith, commoner born, would grudge any man a bit of game taken at the expense of the of the Dars, but to have a good man lead them on this move through the wood only to be punished in the end, that would not help the morale of the rest of the troops. He ran a gauntleted hand down over his beard. It wasn't his way to judge a man for good or ill on such a short acquaintance, but the new young baron seemed to be showing up well. Wellsor had had a had a bad time of it, for sure. Forrest knew of men who'd lost a hand like that, and never were the same after. And that fear of crossbows, well, that might be a good or bad. If it led him on to charge full on at an albalister, it would not give him a reputation for cowardice, though it would finish by shortening his life. And he was a lad who had a mind of his own, but unlike some of the nobles, he could take advice when it was given to him. Old or foul, now, he had been hardy, loud man, fairly shrewd, through his though his own choice to follow the prince in rebellion was not well thought out. Yet, when he returned from war or hunting on it or riding his barony, folk greeted him gladly, and he greeted them in his own loud good humor, often as not with a bawdy jest to some woman in the crowd. Forrest shook his head and smiled to himself. He could hardly see Gwalsor making a bawdy jest with anyone, let alone a woman. Gwalsor was concerned that the people were sullen with him, and that gave every sign that he knew why this was so. And much as he might wish it otherwise, there was no hope that would change had no hope that would change overnight. As for that magic smelling Lafetta, well, the man was a bit standoffish, kept much to himself, and his one concern seemed to be to keep the Baron alive. I wonder what brought him from the Lafetta lands to seek service in the south. Commoner himself, and with enough years to make him at least half wise, Forrest is not about to ask that kind of question of Malgasup personally. The archer appeared before them, woods magician that he was. Safe now, lord, he announced. No guard, then? Asked Ghalsor. No guard now, lord. The archer drew a hand across his throat expressively. Best we get on then. Sorry, best we get on by then, before he's missed. The Baron raised his hand to signal his troops forward. Behind him, Forrest nodded approvingly. They came up to the left rear of the unfinished palisade, across a meadow about 2 bowshots wide. Wellsor surveyed the field in the dim dawn light. How far would you suppose we can get before they see us, Marshal? Forrest shrugged. A faint metallic noise of armor. Depends, Lord, on how well Lord Gweltic holds their attention. True enough. Well, have the men ordered in their battles. We'll move forward quickly, at a walk, until they see us or are close enough for a charge. The men know the word? It was necessary to have a war shout in any battle. In the dust and noise and all, men had to have a way to of knowing friend from foe, and waiting to be clear about the colors of a man in front of you, you might well be waiting too long. They know it, Lord. The sword and the rose. Foray turned to one of his men at arms, repeated the baron's orders, and sent him on his way. It was not long before the man returned, but it seemed hours to Guelsor, who found himself drumming his gauntleted fingers on the leather covered stump of his left wrist. All ready, lords, the soldier said. Forward, then! Guelsor raised his right hand and signaled for the advance. He glanced twice, both right and left, to see that his force was following him, then concentrated on what lay ahead. There was noise and commotion from far away, beyond the palisade. Apparently, Weltic was already about his work, making a demonstration in front of the palisade to provide a distraction. When they had come barely halfway across the meadow, a trumpet sounded from within the unfinished palisade. Guelsor could see Wardik's men ahead, running for positions. He grinned at Malgathup on Farthap beside him. Lockstoya! Then he drew his sword and shouted, Forward! The sword in the rose! The sword in the rose! The shout sounded behind him, faint at first, then swelling into a roar as they swept forward toward the gap in the palisade. The sword in the rose! It seemed to take an age to cross the rest of the meadow, and at the same time armed men were running around from the front to take up positions. Father's boots! They'll be ordered and ready before we get there. It occurred to Guelsor suddenly that there might well be a man up there taking aim at that bloody fool charging across that open meadow in front of the force. Guelsor's hands began to shake, but with his force arrayed behind him, there was nowhere to turn back to. Paulus felt the reins slacken and began to slow. Automatically, Guelsor took the horse under control, and, hunching his shoulders in his mail as if to present a smaller target, he continued to charge. He was close enough to see the shouting faces of Wardik's captains ordering their men. Then suddenly, the first flights of arrows from Grandel's bowmen whipped by overhead, and the Wardic men began to fall. Almost as suddenly, Guelsor found his horse among the enemy, who were still desperately trying to form ranks. All the hard-learned combat lessons proved their worth now. His body moved shield and sword into the right places. Parry, thrust, block, slash. Men fell away with bloody wounds, wiped from his mind as fresh threats appeared. Dust rose around them. A mounted swordsman appeared before him, shouting, The sword in the rose, as he struck. Welsor's shields went up and ready as he answered the shout and saw the shield's device and knew it for one of his knights. The dust and swirling movement of a cavalry melee would often turn a man around from the direction he had previously been attacking. As the knight went roaring on past, Guelsor was left with a brief instant to wonder if it had been an honest mistake or something worse. Then an infantryman was thrusting a spear up at him, and he was fighting again. Suddenly, Wardik's men were throwing down their arms and asking for quarter. The battle, such as it was over. As he steadied his horse, Guelsor considered that this was but the beginning. He did not have the forces available to make a foray into Wardik's lands. But if he simply left, Wardic would send in another force, finish the palisade, and it would be harder to dislodge. Best I finish the palisade myself and establish a force here to keep them out. Before that, though, there were still any number of things to do. He turned to a man at arms behind him, Fine Marshal Forraith, and asked him to set someone to finding out our casualties and to gathering up the Wardic men. Yes, Lord, the man rode off. Guelsor wondered about seeking out the knight who had struck him in the melee, at him in the melee, then decided not. Such things happen on occasion in cavalry battles. No sense to ask questions which might only exacerbate the situation. On the other hand, he would let Melga ask a look into the situation. That just nope. Oh, he would let Melga ask a nope. That still doesn't make sense. And find out what he could about the man's attitude. Okay, so that was chapter 5. Um, as I assumed, I wanted to kind of finish reading up. I kind of wanted to finish reading up the whole entire attack on Gwilla's Hole and the after effects of it, just so I could kind of round that out for the week. So I'm doing that now, which is chapter 6. Alrighty, here goes. Saltern Han Oilaf was dying in the healer's tent. Walsor could hardly remember a moment that when that long, lean, brown-faced figure had not been a part of his life. First as a man-at-arms on his father's barony, then sent with Gwalsor in his new status, and now, having taken an arrow through the lung in what was no more than a minor skirmish, he was dying. The healers and their assistants, all worn to the state of constant fatigue now, said that Saltern had been found late, though even he been brought fresh to their tents at the first moment after the battle, they would have been hard pressed to do much for him. One could forget these things when all the yelling and sword swinging was done, but the aftermath of battle, won or lost, was a grim thing. As Gwelsor stepped out of the healer's tent, blinking in the sunlight, Jadal came rushing up. That boy always seems to be rushing or sitting still, Gwelsor thought. Okay. Lord Baron, the Marshal requires me to inform you that the palisade is done. We could be ready to march back to the castle in 2 days' time. Gwelsor smiled. I'll wager he didn't say it in those words, Jadal. Well, no, not exactly, my Lord Baron. Be careful of that, Jadal. I know Foraith still speaks like a commoner occasionally, but there will be times when you are required to pass a message just the way it is spoken. And if you are in the habit of paraphrasing, you may cause a great deal of grief. The boy's eyes widened. Yes, my Lord Baron. Gwalsor could practically see behind the page's eyes into the depths of intrigue and conspiracy and messages passed in the dark of night. He didn't bother to try to disabuse Jadal. He remembered too well being a boy of that age. Warnings from his elders about over romanticizing ordinary events had never really made much difference to him then. He absently rubbed his left wrist against his thigh. Jadal noticed a gesture. Does your wrist pain you, my Lord Baron? No, not really. Look. He held up his left arm. You can see my left hand is gone. I can see my left hand is gone. Yet I still feel it there. And worse still, it itches and there's nothing to scratch. Jadal's eyes widened once more. Would you like me to fetch Master Pemberlint, my Lord Baron? Wellsor shook his head. I doubt there's anything he could do. I've heard of this sort of thing happening to others who've lost a limb. Now go and tell the Marshal that I would be pleased if he can leave here in 2 days' time. Yes, my Lord Baron. Jadal was off at a run. I don't know much of pages or duties, but I say the boy is a little familiar with you. But wait, I said that incorrectly. I not know much of pages or duties, but I say the boy a little familiar with you. Gloucester was accustomed to Malgathorpe's sudden appearances at his back, so he wasn't startled. And where have you been? Around and about. Wander here, wander there. You'd be surprised how to see how slackers serious get down to work when Baron's wild Lafetta stand little ways off and glance in their direction. And does the Baron's wild Lafetta do more than stand and look at these slackers? He listened to a lot of grumbling too. But peasants grumble, grumble. It mean dust and wind. What worry Baron is things his knights say when they think they not overheard. When not think they overheard. That sounds suspiciously as though the Baron's wild Lafetta has been engaged in a little spying. Malga grinned. If it ease your honor, call it scouting. But I wager your honor not prevent you from hearing anything I learn. Gloucester grinned in return. Me, you, Jadal, and Foraith against the whole of the barony, it seems? Dare I turn down any kind of information I get? Well, not depend serious much on my information. So far all I know is conspiracy out there for true, but not have real evidence about who are conspirators. This little trip out here dampened the conspiracy some. Will its whole not be serious important, but any bit of land belonged to Knight important to him. So you restore land to Knight, Kendall Dar Intor, and he not hear bad word about you for now. The rest, you were stranger, come rule them. None of them like that. Now, maybe serious dislike you, but respect you. Conspirators maybe 3, maybe 4, and they very angry. They may be careless. We watch. Someone maybe speak careless words somewhere. We step on them hard, discourage serious many others. Good. Gloucester was thoughtful for a bit, then said, It's quite a reward my king has given me, isn't it? It be what you make it. You maybe stay on with your father, serve your brother when he inherit, never be much more than minor knight. Perhaps even with no land at all. I think you not like that serious much either. And I doubt if I'd be satisfied even if I were king. There was a hint of laughter on Malga's face. Hush! All you need, one of loyal knights, hear such word. Report to king, and maybe you raise standard of rebellion against him. Tostag Han Arlant, also known as Bloody Tostag, walked with his second in command, admitted only to the name of Manic. You sure he be going this way, man? Tostag was a stocky man, heavy-muscled, with scars of many combats, armed and unarmed. As a token of one of these, his nose was lumpy and a little crooked, but there was no question as to his authority. Manic shrugged. He be going out gathering his mosses and berries. This be his usual path. He paused. You don't be like an old stink maker any more than me, do you? Manic was a bit taller than Tostag, but more slender. He had some visible scars, but the worst scars were inside. No one pressed him about his past. It was clear such questions were not welcome, and no one wanted to wake Manic's anger. I be doubtin' if likin' or not likin'. has aught to do with it, man. He's given us good advice and good help more than once or twice. If he ever be coming to think he could be controlling the rest of this raff and scaff of ours, or rest of this raff and scaff of ours by himself, I'd be suspecting that you and I would suddenly die o' eating bad meat or the like. He'd be making use of us, and we'd be making use of him, man. As long as we, as long as our uses don't start running at cross purposes, I'd soon nothing soon. I'd soon nothing happened to him. Aye, aye, said Captain, said Manic irritably. You be telling me more than a time or two, I reckon. He spat to his left into a pool of dark waters. You'll not be getting me to like the old warlock, though. And I be telling you this more than a time or three. I ain't been asking you be liking each other. Just be putting up with each other. The two of you be good at your two trades, and I'd like not to be forced to choose between the two of you. Ah, there he be. The wizard, Slavlan Hansk, was not an awe-inspiring figure at first sight. His clothing was an ill-matched jacket and hose. His tousled hair and beard were a nondescript gray. His face was squarish and seldom showed expression. Save for his outlandish name, there was little to mark him as special. When one came closer, though, his eyes caught one's attention. They were dark green, and when he turned them on a person, they seemed to be much more than anyone could desire. They seemed to see much more than anyone could desire. He was squatting beside a pond, and he tugged up some bit of root, swished away the muck, then stood up, shook the water from the root, and tucked it, still damp, into his pouch. He looked at the two approaching men, and Tostig had a feeling he'd known they were coming for some time. Well, Master Tostig, what sort of assurance do you need now? There was more than a trace of outland origin in the way his vowels came out. Assurance if I stick a knife into your haughty guts, I won't miss your advice in the future. But aloud he said, I'd be liking to consult with you about the new Lord of Grandel Castle. He felt a little chagrin, for before he'd had to deal with the wizard, he'd never used such a highfalutin word as consult. The wizard's eyes glinted slightly. Ah, yes, the young hero who saved the life of your king at the cost of his left hand. He bean't my king. We be outlaws, remember? He knew he was broadening his dialect in reaction to his previous thought, and that too angered him. The wizard's lips curved slightly. Ah, and I am a foreigner altogether. Well, whosoever the king rules over, the question at hand regards the baron, does it not? What would you wish to consult about? Be you having any way of knowing what he's right about now? Ah, what what he's about right now? Ah, that. Almost as though he'd expected the question, and his own response. Slavlan Hanj stooped, scooped up a palmful of water from the pond, let it run back, then muttered a few words at the drops of water still on his hand. Then, with a short cry of "Aya!" he shook the water off. The droplets arced upward, sparkling unnaturally, then fell again on the dark pond. The waters rippled briefly. Then suddenly, as if in a mirror, there was a sight of a marching troop of soldiers. At their head was a young man who wore a leather cuff on his left arm and a hook extending out of it instead of a hand. They'll be on the march then, said Tostig. But that be telling us little. Where be they marching from and why? Slavlan Hanj muttered a few more words, then put his staff in the water, breaking up the images of the marching troops. Withdrawing the staff, he cried again, Aya! And another picture formed. Over to the west was a small village of neat houses and ramshackle sheds. Extending from this was a dusty path with a verge of grasses, traveling in gentle arcs toward a large castle. On the path, in front of the column of marching soldiers, was the young man on horseback, with a hook replacing his left hand. Further east from the castle, but with no path extending to it, was an irregular green patch of swamp grasses, trees, and bushes. The village is the place from which they have just set out. Their immediate destination is the castle. Beyond it, the swamp of ours. I would venture to guess that they have been seeing to a problem at the border and are now marching toward homeward again. So far as my magic can tell, they have no immediate plans of marching further. Tostig nodded. Having fought one battle, they'll be none too anxious to be fighting again. If they not if they be not bothered too badly, he turned to Manic. Tell the lads then, man. Sally from time to time, but nothing big. Nothing to make that young Baron put his mind to us. They began walking back to the camp. For how long, Tostig? The lads will not be liking to sit here doing nothing. Until we be ready, man. Until we got lads that know every trail in this swamp, and we be more at home here than any man the Baron's got. Then we start raiding proper. The lads not like it, Tostig. We may not keep the lot of 'em. You tell 'em, man. Tell 'em that if they go against my orders, it won't go well with them. Then he realized he was hinting at a threat of magical punishment, and that thought made him glower. Which worked out for the best, because he saw that Manic had noted that glower and would pass on his orders to the lads with full force. As the enemy rode through the castle gates, people were watching, quietly, perhaps a little less sullenly than when Gwalsor first ridden in. Forth watched the Baron. There was no expression on his face, but that very lack of expression spoke loud. They barely know you yet, Lord. These folk take time to change. Gwalsor's smile was a little forced. But wait until that day. I will come riding into the cheers of the people, my gray beard blowing in the wind, white as my banner, and I will force my suit back erect and croak out my reply. Salter's cheers, but Lord, you do take a grim view of things. Perhaps so, perhaps so. Oh well, there are things yet to be done, and there is the mother of my page looking anxiously for her son. And indeed, Brennan was at the forefront of the crowd. Her gaze passed over Gwalsor without expression, seeking among his retinue, her fists twisting her skirt with anxiety. Carry on, Forth. I will rejoin you in a bit. He brought Phallus out of the line of troops and over to Brennan. As she looked up at him and saw him coming, he saw terror on her face, and he knew what she feared. 2 years back, someone had probably detached himself from the returning hunting party to inform her that her husband was dead. He smiled, hoping to reassure her until he came close enough to speak. By the time he was close enough to speak without shouting to all the crowd and embarrassing the lot of them, and probably Jedal most of all, she was standing stiff and pale in the sunlight. Be at ease, lady. I only came to tell you that your son is well. He has been kept busy this morning, running errands here and there. I saw to it that he did not go near the battle, much to his disgust. No one would allow a page of such small experience near a real fight. She seemed not to have heard him. Where is he? Doing the duties of a page, running errands. He'll be by and by. What errands? Well, sir was becoming exasperated. Why, lady, I scarcely know. I send him with a message to someone with express orders to return immediately. Then some other knight calls to him with an errand of his, and so on. He is busy, but unharmed. He is well then? Oh, altogether well, lady. Not even too disappointed about missing the battle. She began to relax. Thank you, my lord Baron. She smiled. Her smile was barely perceptible. Gloucester still sat still, hesitated a moment, looked down at her, but it seemed nothing else was left to say. Good morning, lady. He returned his horse. He turned his horse and rode away. He thought perhaps he heard her say something as he rode, but he did not turn back to see. There were so many eyes marking what he did, and who he spoke to. He affected not to hear. Ye be laying down the law, Aldaith, said Felda, chief washerwoman, to her good friend, the blacksmith's wife. He sent Ronald to the kitchen, he did. Said to tell the cook if he couldn't provide an edible meal next day, the day after that there'd be a new cook in Grandel's castle. She spoke with delight. Felda's feud with the kitchen staff was a legend in the castle. Aldaith clucked her tongue over that. Well, there don't seem to have been many changes, so Ralno must have made him believe. Aye, that he did. That he did. In actual fact, Ralno, as chief steward, was very unlikely to go near the kitchen himself, and sent one of his understewards instead. But Felda was not one to allow actual facts to get in the way of a good story. Well, my story be not so good as yours, but he's picked up that gnome on the way out of Gwilla's hole. Name's Dicky Dacky or something outlandish. He's been peeping and poking all corners of the castle, and they say it's worth your life to even speak harsh to him. This new baron, he's doing a lot of strange things, and there's a lot of as don't like it. Well, he knows a bad meal when he tastes it, that's for sure. In Velda's mind, the discomfiture of the cook covered a multitude of minor transgressions. Marquis de Herlerevent stared across the table at the tapestry on the wall. He was not seeing the historical scene depicted there, any more than he had tasted the meal before him. Brother? Haywin Mar Herelevant Verland spoke, a little tentatively. She had a dark beauty, intended to use that beauty to convince this man or that man to do some, or occasionally not so small, thing for her. Hey, what is it, Heya? He was 15 years her senior, and still vulnerable, in a different sort of way, to her wiles. She smiled at him gently. Morrow, what is it? Certainly that new baron can't be so bad. Why, since you've returned from Grandel's castle, you've hardly said a word to anyone, high or low, except to bark at them. Our baron? He's a young brat, and if he's seen 20 summers, I'm a wild woods runner. Sure enough, he stuck an arm in the way of a quarrel meant for the king, and lost a hand for it. But now he comes and sets everything on its ear, and We all have to beware simply because none of us stuck a knife in Raphael's back when he swore to support the prince. You being a woman, this will mean nothing to you. But he's made Forath his marshal, Forath Hen Oldov, whose only claim to office was that he was a chief under the captain of the castle guard when Francor Dartharis died. Worse, he's knighted this Forath, given him estates, and made him our equal. What's a birth and rank mean if a baron, at a whim of his own, can put some manure-footed peasant up to knighthood and give him authority? She smiled at him gently. Being a man, he had no idea how much more she understood than he could possibly believe. Is he a handsome man, this one-armed baron? Marquian gave a short laugh. Like a woman, of course. All you want to know is whether or not he's a handsome man. She smiled brightly. No, no, Morrow. I was thinking something beyond that. He's a young man, and he makes a decision. Older men, such as yourself, object. But he's a young man and fears looking bad if he changes his mind. He needs a woman to lighten his mind, to make him see that he can, indeed, change his mind without being overthrown. He looked at her shrewdly. And perhaps you might be the mother of the next baron? She smiled at him gently. Let him think what he would think. She had no intention of letting herself be tied down like that. But the more she thought of it, the more she approved of the notion of meeting with the young baron and seeing what might be accomplished to him. Morrow, how would it be if we seek an invitation to Grandel Castle for the Midsummer Festival? It is a little late, but not entirely too late, and perhaps something useful might be achieved there. You think so? His mood suddenly changed. I don't like it. It won't look right. He knows my attitudes, and if I come begging invitations to Midsummer Feast, he'll see something bad in it. Mara, leave all this nonsense to me. Blame it on me, even, if you wish. Say your sister is making herself a nuisance and would very much like to visit at midsummer. Leave the rest of it to me. He looked at her carefully. He was not unaware of young men who flocked around her, or her ability to get her own way in so many cases. I'll see what can be done. Okay. So I have notes to make, so many notes to make. And yeah, it's like I said, tonight will be a night of note making, and then I'll go over my reaction to everything. I don't know that I'm going to read another chapter because I think that's going to put us into another section of the story that I'd rather start next week. So tomorrow night, I'm going to do a reflection, kind of talk about what I plan to do with the chapters I've read so far, because there's already some significant structural changes I want to make, like significant ones. um, yeah, and it's all because there's a pivotal point in the story here. But yeah, um, so that was pretty much everything for tonight. Um, thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you can look for me in the next one. I will probably be back again between 6:30 and between 6 and 7, somewhere in that time frame. And I'll be reading, well, I won't be reading tomorrow night. Tomorrow night I'll be going over what I've read so far and talking about where I'm going to go with the story. And yeah. So I'll talk to you all again later. Yeah. And I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye.